Takes it a minute, so it's ready to go. It's broadcasting. So I'm going to bring up Visio, and basically what we'll do is we'll just look at Vince's final. I'll try to zoom it in here. I don't want a blank drawing. I want the crow's foot. All right, I'm going to maximize. What would be the easiest way? I might go to, is it design, size? What I want to do is change the page size so it takes over the screen more. What? The which tab? The view. And which one? Because I could set the size of the page.
Page width?
Oh, that seems to work. Although I wonder if it's just going to zoom real big. Maybe not. I wonder if it's the same. I think it's the same page size. So I think if I bring an entity over here, it's just going to be really big. Yeah, but is it too much? I mean, what I want to do is be able to get the whole diagram on the screen, which is going to be hard. Let me try one other thing. So let's go. This is view. This is page width. I'm going to undo. So fix to window. What I'm going to do, I think, is go just actually make the physically page bigger. What? Yeah, I was going to too. Size, where's the custom size? More page sizes. And let's see. Landscape would help, but let's do, how big do we want it for width? Anybody have a good idea?
14 by 14.
By 14? Try that. Still kind of, although I could zoom that, I could page that now. All of this is just trying to get it. So if I page width, that's a little better. We'll see if we can get it all on there. It would be nice if it was. I'm also going to change the, I'm just going to make this a little darker so it shows up better. So let's see what we can do with this. Let's do the entities first and then we'll do the relationships. So what are some of the entities? You guys had pretty good lists.
Inventory.
So there's inventory. One of the things that we did with inventory is we also, a lot of people had an album, right? The idea of this is that you could enter the album information once, and that same album could appear many times in inventory because, you know, it would have different conditions and different, maybe even different years and things like that. So this, having an album thing would keep you from having to repeat all this information. So I'm going to do, I'm just going to say like album ID. We'll worry about what that is once we actually build it. What do we have also? We have like the album title. This is just generic information, not specific about it. What else would we want? Anything? Studio?
I feel like the name is really anything
That you really need?
that you really need, just because it's the only thing that everything else about the album, like its year or its condition or whatever, will be specific to the inventory.
Right, the studio is probably
Oh, yeah.
constant. I don't know if anybody ever lifted an album from a
Not
studio.
always. Yeah. I mean, in reality, I mean, we could say that it's constant for this script, like in reality.
I think even in reality, artists are not necessarily bound, but usually they don't take their albums with them, do they? Anybody know? I mean, you might be. That's actually a good question. What?
Everything's free these days anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of the, well, actually, these days you might not even have a studio. So we could just do the name. I'll just get rid of studio. It's not that important for the store anyway. People aren't going to go and say, I want everything that by Atlantic. They're going to say, I want.
There are iconic labels though.
There are. If you go back to, oh, what was the one with Elvis and Sun? Yeah,
Sun and like Roxy music.
yeah. Or what was December's first one? Kill Rock Stars. All right, so we got an inventory. I'm going to put inventory ID there. One of the things, though, when you're doing these, and this is for real life too, you want a complete list of everything you need, but you don't necessarily want to add a bunch of stuff that you don't need. It all means more data to enter, for one, right? So if you don't need more than the title for what you're doing, you don't necessarily have to add more stuff. What about, so this basically just gives us so that the title is basically, we have a list of album titles. So one of the things we'll have here is the album ID, right? That'll be a foreign key. I'm going to mark them as foreign, try to mark them as foreign keys. And then we'll do the, as I said, this, I will try. Then we will do the lines later. What else do we want to know in the inventory?
The condition.
Okay. And
Got all this.
what?
Got all this up.
Right. I'm just going to do the whole database again. So, but this time we're going to get the whole thing up. Yeah. Inventory condition. I'm going to try to follow my naming convention. You do not have to. What else would be in here?
The sales price.
You might have the sale prices. So the price you want to sell it for?
Yes.
Yes, so
Yeah, you could do that. Inventory sale price. As I said, my naming convention is pretty ugly. Anything else? What else?
Like a purchase ID.
Purchase ID, because you probably want to link it to its when it was purchased.
If we don't want to put all of them through we have to put all of them.
You don't necessarily. I'm going to do this, as I said, if you have your own version that you prefer, for whatever reason, you can try to go with it.
I was just going off the comments. I didn't want to have to go through it.
Oh, you just don't want to have as many fields?
I don't want to have too many. That's all. I just didn't want to have too many.
Oh, yeah. You want to have the things that you need. Like we need the condition. We probably need the price. Now, if the price is consistently calculated off the purchase price, you could leave that out.
I have condition as its own entity with an ID that is linked to the inventory.
So you could do that.
And then a standard markup under condition.
So you could do a condition ID. And then what you would have is you would have a condition entity.
I just wanted to build for the possibility that maybe, I mean, it says that there's a standard markup of 150%, but maybe at some point they want to change that or have different markups for different conditions.
You could, although you could argue that if you paid $1 for it because it's a crappy condition, that, 150, it's 250, right? And you might give it for less too, yeah.
So part of it was also building a database. So if you wanted stuff to be queryable, would we have to separate it like that?
No, so if you have the condition in here, because we only have a few conditions, right? We have mint, good, fair, poor, whatever. The only advantage of doing this, now it might be if you put like a price markup or something like this, but this is because what they call a lookup table. And what it gives you an advantage if you want to do this. This is not a requirement of this at all, but it would give you consistency so that somebody doesn't just write F for fair, P for poor, and somebody else writes the whole word. Because then if you do a search, if this isn't consistently done, it can be hard to find, be like all the fair, all the poor, all the mint. If you do a lookup table like this, you can force it to be a pattern. Basically, because you're using the ID rather than the word, it's always going to be consistent. Lookup tables are there just for consistency. A common lookup table, you can probably imagine some of them, the states, a list of all the states, and their abbreviations or something, that's a constant, a really common lookup table. It has nothing to do with the main, function of the database, but it keeps things consistent. And consistency makes a big difference when you're searching for things. Does that make sense? So condition is optional for sure, but it would help you keep things consistent. So I will put it there, but just so you can know. And we'll do the right now I'm just going to put the condition name in there. So it's just a lookup table. In a sense, the album is functioning as a lookup table too. It's just all the albums you've ever had. There is another advantage to doing the album separately. We haven't decided, and I'm not sure I'm clear about how I would want to do this. When you've sold something, do you remove it from inventory? Or do you just flag it as sold?
I think you would keep it because you have to have that information for your books.
Yeah.
I want to know if you had an album at one point.
Yeah, so you might want to know. So we could say, just trying to do my thing, inventory sold, and that would basically be a yes or no type field, binary field. Now, you don't actually have to have that to know if it's been sold. It would be in the sale list, right? Your sale detail. So you could just query the sale detail list with the inventory.
If the inventory is linked to sales detail, like you're putting an inventory ID on the sale,
Yeah.
you don't, like, you can find it. You don't
Yeah, you don't have to have this thing. You had a question.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there any way to sharpen the text on the overhead?
So it's really hard to see back there.
Well, I could try moving, but it seems like the words are blurry.
I don't know if I can sharpen. I could try. Let me try one other.
Can you turn off those lights?
I can turn down. Let's go back to where I was. You saw better when it was blue. To me, that was really hard to read. I can turn. So if I turn the lights down, that brings it back down. I want to kill the light bulb. Alright, let's lower it a lot. I can try to zoom it a little more too. Let me see if I can zoom lower it to. Or maybe I can use a different. That's as far as that's going to go. Just go out. All right, let me let's try a different contrast. And then we'll try, if that fails, is that any better? Probably not. That's what I had before. That isn't better, is it? That's harder. That one? Well, I can zoom. I know I can zoom. I can zoom down here too. Let's go back though. So I was just trying to get it all in, which is going to be impossible, obviously. I'm going to go back. I think that has higher contrast than the blues. Is that bigger enough?
I think it's better.
I just made it bigger. As I said, the downside of this is that we're never going to be able to get the whole diagram into the window. I'll go with the bigger though. This is a long room. I probably have trouble seeing there too. So
Yeah, the size was a little bit too.
yeah, yeah, I know. I did. There are some. It was nice when we had those TVs. And we'll probably have those, they'll be back, but whenever they finish. All right, so inventory sold, as we were talking about, can be calculated from just comparing, if the number is in the cell, then it's not, then it's been sold. This could make sense, though, just to make that an easier search. So I'm going to leave it for right now, but. Is there anything else we need in inventory?
I have year in there.
Yeah, so you might have the year of the album. So I don't know how to name this. My naming convention doesn't always work. Inventory.
Do you want to put that in album or?
Well, so there's a question. So like if you have, these are individual, right? So you could have a.
Like an album's re-released.
Yeah, albums are re-released quite often. So it makes a huge difference actually for some, whether it's 1966 or 1986 or 1996 when the release happened.
Do you have the inventory cost also?
What?
The cost?
So one of the things you could do, you could have the cost in there, but we're also going to have purchase, right? Where this is for when Vince purchases. So I'm going to do this as purchase ID. Right. So I think I would do now. Here's a question. So when you're purchasing it, it may not be in inventory yet. So I would probably make album ID. What that would force you to do when we do that as a foreign key there, it would force you to enter the album before you could do the purchase. And that's something you have to decide. And I would do,
I guess I kind of figured that he probably would just like buy them and then like.
and then just add them. Yeah. So you might not need you might not need the album ID, but you might want to, so that's a question. But this is really a matter of a business rule as opposed to a database rule to some extent.
This guy's probably cleared out the basement. He doesn't even know what he bought.
Yeah. So maybe we don't want album ID there. Maybe we just want title. The item title or something.
I was under the presumption that the bulk of his buying would actually be happening like.
In the store.
Right, if people were walking in. And
Yeah.
Hey, I want to sell you these.
Wouldn't you want to look them up before buying it?
Possibly. So it depends again on how you see the the business guy. So are you buying in bulk from estate sales? Somebody come in with a stack and you just say, I'll give you $20 for the stack. And then you go through and figure out if they're worth anything. I mean, you can do that kind of thing. Or you could be really strict about it and carefully price each album. Have you ever sold books back to like half price books or anything like that? They don't advise it, they rip you off.
I'm a hard reader. They're just spoiled.
So you just give them the books and they give you a percentage of the cover price. And it's a very small percentage, like 5 to 10% of the cover price. They don't worry about whether the book is worth the cover price or not.
In your purchase and sale, can you add columns to, I mean, to kind of like allow for that scenario? Like if you put inventory ID and album ID and, you know, like both of them in the purchase detail, but didn't make them required, would that cover the scenario that like?
It might, although, so, because there might be, so I wouldn't put the inventory ID in here because the purchase ID is over here. Does that make sense?
Okay, I don't have the purchase ID in my inventory.
Oh, you don't?
So,
I would, but I think that actually belongs in as a foreign key over here. Because it would give you all the information about the purchase. There's one other thing about the purchase that I would put in there.
but if your inventory table is linked to your purchase detail table, it has that in it anyway, doesn't it?
I would go this way. I actually would go from purchase to this. I think if you go the other way, you're going to find problems. Because you're going to purchase things that aren't in your inventory. And yes, you could leave it null, but to me, it just logically doesn't make sense going this way. It makes sense going this way. You purchase something and then you add it to inventory. And then there's a lot of other things. One other thing about purchase, anything else we want about purchase? There's one big thing more that I can think of.
If you make a purchase, there's that multiple issue where
So we could do, this is a thing too, if we could do purchase. So one of the things is the customer, yeah. Now, some of you make a distinction between customers and sellers, but they could be both. You know, I'm not sure I would distinguish them. If they're a seller, if they sell you something, they're a customer if they buy something. So we're doing right now, we're doing each album as a separate purchase.
Yeah, I did mine the same way we did sales.
Is right, which is another way you could do this, which is probably a better one. So if we do a purchase detail, and then, so purchase detail would have the purchase, detail ID. It would have the purchase ID. And it would probably have the purchase price, because it's per album, right? I'm going to delete that. So it'd have the purchase price, probably have the album title or the album ID, whichever way you want to go. And it would probably, now here you could go with purchase ID or purchase detail ID. Either one would probably be okay. Because if you do purchase ID, you could go to purchase and then to purchase detail. But you might, in order to get the price, I would probably do this as purchase detail ID. Does that make sense? And this would be a foreign key, which I've marked. This would be a foreign key. I'm trying to mark them as we go. I may not, I'm probably missing a few. Customer ID would be a foreign key. Does this make sense so far? what, I mean, you guys did it, and a lot of what you guys did looked good, so feel free to add and subtract from these. Yeah, no comment. That looks okay. I'm gonna put the lines in a bit. Those are the hard parts in some ways, yeah. I think I would do, so it depends on how, if you put it in just purchase, that means that every single album is a separate purchase. This way you could say if you bought, you went from this customer and you bought 10 of them, they could all be listed as one single purchase, and then you'd have the 10 items that are in there. Does that make sense? Just like sale and sale detail. So I don't think it's inherently wrong to say that every album is a separate purchase. It's again, it's sort of how you define your business rules. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just for the, fact that it's in the number of items that one customer may have less than
Say it again. My ears aren't that good.
From that customer, you could just so many items.
Yeah, I put the customer, I think I would put it on the purchase. I'm assuming that it's one customer per purchase, but each customer could sell multiple things. Does that make sense? And we do need a per customer entity. So why don't we do that next? I may have to move things around when I draw lines, right, to make it make any sense at all. So let's do customer. Customer is one name for this. If you want something else as a name, because I'm going to use it for both the people that purchase, that sell to Vince, and for the people that purchase from Vince. They're all going to be customers. Sometimes what I do is I just do a people. Just call it people. Yeah, it could be client. Client is another word we could use. I sometimes put the employees in there too. Just because it's one place to store people information. Let's do client. Client sounds good. Customer is also fine. I mean, the thing is that somebody that sells to you can also buy from you, so they could be both. It's also possible even the people that work for you could buy from you or sell to you.
One giant database of all your customers, vendors, buyers, sellers, and everything.
Yeah, now I'm not, I know some of you did do vendors, and if you want to, you can. I'm because these are all used, I'm assuming that he's not dealing with professional vendors.
Right.
That adds a little complexity. If you want to say that the vendors, that's fine. But that I'm trying to keep it a little bit, as I said, simplified. For one thing, in our inventory, we've only got albums. And as I said last time, any real life inventory at his record store is going to be more complex because they're going to sell needles and phonographs and all sorts of other things that go along with having vinyl. Cleaning things, a lot of vinyl needs cleaning. There'd be all sorts of things that they would sell. I'll call it a client ID. If you named it customer and want to leave it customer, that's perfectly fine. What is, and it's actually doesn't violate third normal form to have like a customer one and a purchaser one. It's just that the people may be the same at different times, and you might end up repeating their names.
I went with the presumption that most of the sellers were also going to be
Yeah.
vendors, and that you didn't want to duplicate that.
If you separate them, it adds the possibility of repetition, across things, because customers can be sellers and vice versa. It also just means that you have more than one. I mean, it's nice to put all your people in one place. You don't have to, but it makes your life a little easier in the end. So we would want, and I did customer ID up here, so if we're changing that to client, I want to change that too. Notice a naming convention. I name foreign keys the same as the primary key. You do not have to do that. They can have different names. But in my mind, it just makes it easier if they have the same name. If you do name it something different, it has to be real clear what it's doing, that it is being a foreign key to a particular table. Does that make sense? But there's no database rule that requires that the foreign key have exactly the same name as the primary key. I just think it makes more sense. So I just wanted to let you know, because it is possible you could name them differently. And when we do SQL, because these have the same name, we will have to do client.client ID equals purchase.client ID. We'll have to distinguish them by using the table name because they have the same name. If you named them differently, you wouldn't have to do that necessarily. Anyway, so we have the client. Now, you could do client name, or you could do last name, first name. One of the issues is if you do name, you always have to search for the whole name, right? If you do client last name, client first name, then you can search by their first or their last name. You can only search by the fields that you have. Does that make sense? So by the attributes that you have. We probably want their email. In fact, I'm quite sure we want their email.
You may also want their phone number.
You may.
If they're requesting items.
You may. That's sort of up to you, because you could always email them when it's in too. I certainly wouldn't make the phone number a requirement. I also so for purchases, I would make the client have to register. If you're going to buy from them, you need their info. If they're buying from you, I would not make them.
With the client as it is now, how would it run as far as like looking them up every time they purchase?
So one of the things you could do is you could just look up purchases, right? So the client ID is going to be in purchases. So you know that if you've purchased from them in the past, they'll be in the purchase table.
Right. But because the client ID assumed like random, so how would they?
But it'll always be tied to this. Even though we use a random number, all right, the number 4, say, will always be tied to exactly the same client. It doesn't vary, right? A single client will have a single number associated with them, and that won't change.
I also have mailing list as its own entity with an ID that, again, so that, like, because one of the things is, like, they might want to have a mailing list for their clients, so that people can't put Y or yes, and you have to search that for the consistency across, indicating that somebody wants to be involved.
Right, so I would put something like client mailing list here and just make it a true or false. Because you have their email, right? So you could make a separate one, but I think I would just do that with a query. I mean, I would just.
For the consistency, I guess, because I was thinking people could, like, as you're entering your client information, some people might put yes, and some people might put Y, and some people,
Well, so you could do, one of the nice things about software is you could put it, if we make this a Boolean, it has to be full true or full false in, so actually SQL Server doesn't have a Boolean. It has bit, 0 or 1. Right, 1 usually is true.
So if there's anything in the column, then it will return as true.
Right. Well, so if there's a 0 in the column, it's false. There's 2 values for a bit, 0, 1. And so it's 0 is false, 1 is true. That's basically the only options you have if you give it that data type. Does that make sense? So consistency wouldn't matter. It would if you make it a character type.
Okay.
Then it would make a difference. Yeah. You could have an entity for a mailing list. I think it might be a little redundant though, because you don't need. So this would be, and one of the things we might want to do if we really want to refine this is go through and see what we would require and what we wouldn't require. I'm not going to worry about that right now. So we've got inventory, album, condition, purchase, and purchase detail, client. So we need the sale and sale detail, right? We need the point of sale. Trying to think if there's anything else. Do you guys want?
Album and artist.
Yeah, we might want artist. So I'm moving these down a little so I can put artist. Because artist would be a common search.
And requests.
Yeah,
Have a-
let's do a point of sale and then we'll do request. So I'm going to do artist. I'm going to do an artist ID. And when I do IDs on these, I realize I'm kind of punting. I actually, if I were to do this, I would do that all as auto numbers. You don't have to. I'm just going to say artist name. I would almost just be content with that. It's basically a lookup list of artists. But if you guys want more, like country of origin, you know, birth, are they living or dead?
I just put name first and name last.
You could do that. Although I'm not sure that always applies. It's Madonna. I would do, when I say artist, I would say the Beatles. I wouldn't necessarily, but there would also be separate entries for McCartney and Lennon and Harrison because they have albums on their own as well. I wouldn't be real fine about this, although you could, I suppose, if you wanted. No, from which? The client shouldn't have a purchase ID in there, but the client ID should be in purchase. Does that make sense? One of the things, a real instinct when you're doing this, although I didn't see much of it when I looked at your things, your diagrams that you turned in, one real instinct is there's a feeling like it should go both ways, right? When you're doing a connection, there's a feeling like purchase should be, you know, client ID should be over here and purchase ID should be over here in the client. You don't want to do that. It creates a loop, it creates an infinite loop. It makes it so you can't enter anything. But there is an instinct for that you're trying to connect things and that you see them both, you know, it's a fairly normal instinct. No, it won't. It just won't let you do it. Basically what happens is you can't enter a client until you enter a purchase, and you can't enter a purchase until you enter a client. So it just creates a loop that you can't escape from. And the way you know that that happens is when you try to enter data and it won't let you. So
one of the business rules is that they get a discount.
right, and we should figure out the discount thing because I'm actually a little unclear how I would handle that too, even though I told you to do it.
Well, I was thinking maybe it would go to clients.
So there is a way to do it in client. One is you could just keep like the last discount date or something.
And the number of albums bought.
Quantity purchase.
You could, although you could do that from the sale, which we haven't done yet. So you could see how many albums they purchased this year. But you don't want to give them we didn't say. If they bought 10, is every album after that discounted or just one?
I took it as like every tenant you get a 20% discount. Not
Right.
like everything after that.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking is if you did just like last discount date, then you could just see if they have 10 since that date in the sales. Does that make sense?
I guess I figured that would be something you figure out by pulling reports, you know, like that's a UI, like a report feature, not a column on the data on the table.
So you could, but a report is done basically by virtue of a query.
Right.
And you could query the sale table to figure out how many sales they've had, say, since a given date. I don't know. You could also just put a tally in the client. Do you guys have a preference? Because it's really a matter of this. I'm not sure it matters a whole lot which way you go, whether you just tally and then empty it once they've gotten the discount.
I like that last discount date.
Last discount date you could do just from the. Let's do that, and then we can decide. If you want to leave the tally, you can do that too. So I'm going to add. So one of the things that you don't have enough experience of probably to have faith in is that any piece of data in a well-designed database is comparable to literally any other piece of data. You can get, but it may take some fairly complicated queries. But you can literally compare anything with anything. And so you could find this, and you could go through and you could just find all of the purchases for a given customer after that date. And it should be, it'll probably at this point involve 3 or 4 tables, which could be a little bit complicated, as I said. So let's do the sale detail, and then we'll do the request. So there are, I think it's in the other class. Somebody did it all as just a transaction table, and then they had a flag in here to say what kind of transaction it was. So rather than do purchase detail, sale detail, they just had a flag to say whether it was a purchase or a sale, you know, or a refund or whatever. That means that every single album has to be treated as a separate transaction to do that. I think it would work. I just think this is probably the traditional way of doing this works better. So I'm going to do a sale ID, which would be just a sale number. One of the things when you do auto numbers, if you don't like sales that go like 1, 2, 3, you could start at 1,000, start at 10,000. You can have an arbitrary starting place. You want bigger numbers. Doesn't bother me to do them at 1. So we'd want the sale date, right? Whoa. We want the customer or the client ID. Although I think when you're doing a sale, the client ID should be optional. It shouldn't be required. Yeah. You don't want to not do a sale because they won't give you their info. You want to encourage their info. And one of the reasons why you would want to encourage their info is basically you can market to them later, you know, and it also gives you, you know, it just gives you more information that you can use when you're doing your sales and things. In a lot of web businesses, this is what is worth money. It's sort of sad, but it's when you register that they can, you know, they can sell that. The other thing that is, if you're doing big data, if you're doing business analysis, it's really useful to have customer information. You may not care about their name or first name, but one of the things that we don't have, so we have their phone or their email. Typically in a customer list, I'm not assuming Vince is going to do a lot of customer analytics, but you would probably want their like zip code. Yeah, that's probably more important than their name. But generally they drop the names out when they do the analysis because it's not that relevant. But the zip code can be really relevant, and also other things if they're willing to give it to you are like their income level and education level and all of that. I mean, you can do a lot of analysis in terms of who's buying what and why and from where, and that's really useful for businesses. That's why you have all the grocery stores and all the retail stores have their memberships and their discounts is because that information is worth gold to them, right? It's worth giving you 5% off of their 150% markup to get that information. Or to get gas. I do it for gas. All right. So we got sale date, client ID. What else? Maybe we didn't do this yet. You might want, because Vince has employees, you might want the employee ID for that sale. And the main reason is that if there are any issues with this sale or anything, you could know which employee to talk to. I'm assuming they don't pay by, that Vince doesn't pay by commission or anything. All right. Sale detail. As I said, I will post this. Shouldn't, because next quarter, maybe I'll do a different database next quarter. Anyway. So I'm going to do sale detail. Again, most of this is stuff that most of you had most of this. Does that make sense? Most of you were in pretty good shape for all of this. A lot of you were missing like one little piece of it or something, but most of you had most of it. So sale ID is a foreign key. And we would want the inventory ID. That's also a foreign key. So I'm trying to, as I said, mark the foreign keys. What else would we might want there? I didn't hear.
The discount.
Yeah, so maybe the sale, I'm trying to do my naming convention, sale detail, discount. And one of the things you could do is you could set a default as 0. So if you don't do anything with it. Now, if the price, we have a sale price there, so you could just do the discount to figure out the actual price. Although, what if you sell it for more than you did? This works if you sell it for less. You could do a discount, but I don't know what happens if you do it for more.
You have a tax one where you have an option.
So you could put, I'm not sure if I would bother to put tax in here, though you could. Tax is pretty well required.
There's some specific instances in Washington State where it's not required.
Yeah, but they have to deal with food, don't they?
Well, and where people live. Like people from Alaska and Oregon currently don't pay sales tax when they buy things here. So turning it off it doesn't happen often, but it does happen.
They'd have to mention it because they generally, I don't think, do it automatically. It's
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
like when you go to Oregon, you're supposed to pay Washington sales tax.
Right.
It's also on B2B, if you're selling to another regular seller.
If you do what?
If it's
If
a
it's
business to
business.
business.
Oh, there might be a
You can turn it
difference.
off.
So let's ignore all of that, but those are real life. I mean, those are good things to think about because one of the things when you look at this is to think about how much more complicated it could really be. We're making a very simplified first database. I mean, this gives you kind of the basic structure, but it's ignoring all sorts of real life things, like a more complicated inventory, a more complicated sale, pricing. There are lots of things that we're kind of ignoring. Is there anything else in there that we need? I think it'd be on the sale, because when you're doing this, this is like the top of the receipt, so it'd be a single transaction. And then in here, what you have is you have as many rows as you need. Like if they buy 5 albums, there'll be 5 sale details tied to this one sale.
Oh, I see.
So we might think about that, but I think it's okay.
really judgmental. I think there should be a client ranking.
You could do that. I'm not gonna, but yeah, you could do that. One of the things, if you were building this as an underlying database, you might have a separate piece of it that's like a social media, right? Yeah.
Is that the same price?
So I'm saying that the price is in inventory. So because the price is there, the only thing you have to account for is if you're selling it at different than the price. That's what the discount is for. Yeah.
Maybe you already all this, but isn't there a discount if you bought more than 10?
Right. And we were debating how to do that. So there's two ways, and I think we did talk about it a little bit just before we got to that's okay. I put a client last discount date. So in the sales, you could say how many have they bought since that date. Another way to do it, if you want, is just to keep a accumulation of how many they have toward their discount. So you could just say purchase. I mean, you could count that. The trouble with going directly off the sales is that you don't know when they got their last discount. So say they bought 30 albums for you. You don't necessarily want to keep giving the 10%. You want it for every 10 albums. So you could either just number, say they've purchased 5 since their last discount, or you could do the last discount date and then just use the sale table to calculate how many albums they bought since that sale date.
I believe in the argument, there was a specific mention of Vince wanting to like potentially raise the price of the album, like at the time of the sale. So if we
Right.
change discount to adjustment, could that just cover that?
That could be, we could do an adjustment. Discount is assuming that you're doing like a strict percent, and the adjustment, I mean, you could just do an adjustment and say that at -5 plus. I mean, we could do it as adjustment. That actually gives you a little bit more control. All right, so I think the only thing we have left before I try to connect all these, right? Oh, we got room up there. Is the request. So,
And then don't we need also a linking table between album and artist?
well, we do. Thank you. Maybe I should do that first. What? I'm going to ignore returns, actually. Now, if you want to include them, you'd have to figure out. That could be, I think if I did returns, I'd probably hook it to sale or sale detail. I'd have to think about returns a little bit, how to do them. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to change. So when you do a return, there's a few things you'd have to do. I don't know that I would modify the sale detail, but I might actually have a thing here, but you would have to modify the inventory. And you would have to modify, you might have to modify the sale detail. I suppose, although it seems a little bit, because 99% of the time it'd be left empty, you could probably put a return flag or something in the sale detail.
I had originally had a stock status entity, and then tied that to my inventory listing to signify whether an item is in stock or not in stock, which could be used in a return scenario, but I primarily did it because in the argument, it talked about future plans to potentially sell things on the internet on their website.
But you could do, I mean, just search the inventory, and if it's not sold, it should be in stock.
Right.
Although you might want to do other things if you're doing it online, like you might want to, so you'd want to look for all the albums of a certain title and maybe list them all out with their various conditions and things like that. But you could do that.
Maybe we could change inventory sold to inventory status. And then
That actually might make sense, but I'm not sure that still handles with, I'm not sure that does anything with returns necessarily. You really don't need this field because you can calculate it, right? I'm just saying it might make the query easier because you can calculate it. If the inventory ID is in the sale table, then it's gone. You could also, and some people do this, delete it from the inventory when they've sold it.
Right, but then in the case of a return, like you have
Well,
to
you could
recreate-
re-enter it into inventory with a new number.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if you want to delete it. That actually is a business decision you could make. You know, you could delete things from inventory once they've been sold, or you could flag it, or you could just do a query where you know, when you're looking for what's in there, you always do a query about making sure that the number isn't in inventory. I mean, isn't in sale. You could set a return period too. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things you could do. For the most part, though, I think I'm going to, as I said at first, we had a discussion about that, and you certainly could work things through if you want, but I think I'm going to ignore returns for right now. There are also a lot of used record stores and things. Sold as is, no return. Is not uncommon.
But the only reason why I brought that up, is you should be selling other things other than out, so you probably got needle, turn thing.
Right, and so if you were doing more than the album, returns become more important. You know, particularly like, yeah, turntables and albums.
So just focus on the album.
Right now, we're just doing the albums, and you can work in a return thing if you want, although typically with albums, used albums, it's sold as is, no return. The other stuff, yeah, you're right, they would have to have a return policy for those.
Could you just buy it back if you were in your record
You
store?
could just buy it back, that's another thing you could do. Right, so it'd just be a new purchase.
You return it, just they'd sell it back to you.
Yeah.
Maybe sell them something else.
And then it wouldn't be an issue, you just re-enter it into inventory under a new number. Yeah, that actually is not a bad way to do it. The only disadvantage to that would be that you wouldn't necessarily track it as a return. But I'm not sure that matters a whole lot.
Sometimes people go out with 10 albums and try to come out with 2, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So this is for, I'm going to say artist album. And I'm going to do artist ID, and I'm going to move, well, actually, we'll move this, no. What have I got this on? It's on Pointer. I just want to move, I don't want to move everything. I just want to move this stupid line. There, I got it. An album ID. One of the things you can do, and then I'm going to delete that. I'm going to set this as primary key, foreign key. This is a compound key, a composite key. You don't have to do that, but a lot of times with linking tables, I do. And what it does is that means that you can't assign the same artist to the same album twice. Keeps you from doing that. It also keeps you from applying, well, basically that's what it keeps you from doing. You can only apply an artist to an album once. What happens when you have a composite key is that neither side has to be always unique, but the pair together have to be unique. Does that make sense? You do not have to do this. But I often do, because linking tables aren't going to have any child tables. So the awkward, you know, well, you won't worry about the awkward key. And the reason we're doing the linking table is, again, anybody?
It's a many-to-many relationship.
Right, because one artist can have many albums and one album can have many artists.
So the
Yeah.
alternative to doing this would be giving artist album its own primary.
Its own primary key. Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. So I think the last thing before we do the connections is requests. So request IDs, because I'm just sort of punting on all of those. We want to know the customer or the client ID, right? So that would be a foreign key. We would want to know what they're requesting. Here's a question. Do you want it just to be like a title, or do you want it to be the album ID?
I built it the same way as I built the sales and the purchases. So there's like a request, and then there's request details, so that one person could request multiple things on the same request.
You could. And so it's a question if you want to do that or if you want to treat each one as a separate request. Either way is fine. I'm going to just treat each one as a separate request because I'm tired of drawing boxes. But I mean, you could, so you could say if they request 5 albums, you don't necessarily care whether they all come in at once, right? It's sort of a, the question I have, do we want album ID here or do we want just a title?
I just,
If you put album ID, you have to create a new one, or new record, you don't know.
Well, so if you have an album, so your album, what's in album doesn't have to be an inventory, right? So you could, if they don't have the album in your album list, you could add it. Or if you just have a title, you may not care to add it until you actually own it. I could see it going either way. So I say there's variations here depending on how you define the business rules for what's going on. So you don't have, the thing is that you don't have this album in inventory currently, or there wouldn't be a request, right? That's sort of the idea. It may be that you've never had it in inventory, or maybe you did. But I wouldn't tie it to inventory because it's not there now. So you could tie it to album. It means you'd have to enter the album if it's not in there already. Or you could just put the title. Yeah.
I guess I tied it to album ID because if somebody's requesting it and you're gonna get it for them, you're gonna have to enter it anyway. So
Yeah, although there are some albums that you may never see. But let's do album ID. And if you do other, that's fine. If you decide to go with the title, that's fine. The other thing I would put here, and you could get more specific about this, but I'm going to just say request notes. This is more, now you could, as I said, you might want to break this out into fields if depending on how you search for things. So you might want to know like what the condition is. What condition do they have limits on what conditions they'll take? Are they only looking for mint? So if you wanted to, you could break this into condition year. If they only want a particular year, you could do, you could break it out into some things. Right now, I'm just going to say this is just where you write some freehand notes, basically, which you can do in a database. It's actually okay to have a notes field where you just type in some general observations. Yeah. You would put a request date. That actually is very important.
I also have an employee ID on the request as well.
That's actually not a bad idea either. So let's do
It's not required because some of these might come from.
The date is important because what if 2 people request the same thing? Who has priority? So I would say the person that requested first has priority. So the request date, and it wouldn't hurt to have an employee. Now, I didn't do an employee entity, did I?
No.
Should I?
Yeah, boy, I get it, sale here.
People always gonna be requesting an album, or they just want something by iPad?
I also have artist ID if I request Google, but
Yeah, that's a good question. Do we, maybe you don't make this required.
right. I don't have anything required in the request detail itself.
Yeah,
So
we could put artist. What? There are ways to do what's required or not. I'm going to put artist ID. So you might want something. Somebody I just thought of recently that I hadn't thought about since the 1970s. Melanie? Anybody ever remember?
Oh, yeah.
She was the ultimate hippie. And I kind of liked her songs then, 30, 40 years ago. Weirdly, this is totally irrelevant, but I found there are hundreds of videos on YouTube, even going back to the Ed Sullivan show and things. So. There's nothing that's not on the internet sometimes, I think. All right. So we need an employee one. And then we will try to draw our lines, and I will try to draw them in a way that makes sense. And then I'll post this, and then we'll do the second part, which is we'll try to install SQL Server. This is going to be a map. And again, if you have variations, that's fine, for when we build it in SQL Server, right? You can use this as a map to follow. That's the point of these, actually. Also, their documentation. So if you're working with a company and you want to know what does the database look like, you can give them a diagram like this, right? This is what the database.
I think that one of the hardest things I've had to deal with in doing this is like my mind wants to think about it. Like if I am looking at a user interface, what am I going to see?
Right.
Not what we're building.
Right. This isn't what you're not building the interface, because the user interface is going to combine lots of these things. Right? And a lot of the calculations and stuff will be done by the user interface, not in the database itself. A lot of the stuff that you think about will be done. You know, you can if you build a user interface, it's going to pull up not just the inventory number and the album ID. It'll pull up the probably the inventory number and the album title and the artist title and the purchase price. I mean, you can bring it from all over the place and have all that information together on the screen when you're looking at it. Probably in real life, we're just going to arbitrarily enter it, but you could enter barcodes, right? You could scan in a barcode, and you can buy sticker books full of barcodes. So it wouldn't be the barcode that the original manufacturer put on it, I don't think, because we're dealing with them each individually. But so there's lots of things with the interface that'll be a little bit different than the underlying database. So employee ID. And I'm just going to do employee name, although you could do first and last if you want. Again, this isn't a human resources database, so I'm not going to include like salary. I'm not going to include their social security. I'm not going to include their deductions. I'm not going to. That's a whole nother ball of wax. What? You know, you might.
But that's going to be in an HR.
Yeah. The very most I would put is like an email in case you needed to wanted to look them up real quickly without. But I'm not even sure I would do that. All right, so let's look at some lines here. We have most of our, I did mark most of the things as keys. So we've got the album ID here. Let's maybe go with that first. I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to do a relationship. So the album would be the one side. Because so one album could have many. God, I hate how that does that. Everything is just so jumpy in Visio, and it's really hard to control where things go. And I'd really rather that lines went exactly where I drew them instead of bouncing around like that. But anyway, we have one album. See, one could do many. Do you need these things made bigger? The endings? Okay. If it isn't, let me know. The only thing that's important is where the 1 and 3, as I said. I'm not too worried about like the 0. This means one album can have many or 0 representations in here, but I'm not too worried about the 0s or the 1s in there. So let's do also one too many is one album. So I'm gonna hook it somewhere in here. Can go to, you know, the album is the one side. You only enter it once in album, but that album ID could appear many times down here if it has multiple artists. Same with the artist. I'm going to just drag another relationship here. One artist could be in many albums, could have many albums. Okay, so we got that. Does that make sense? Most of you had, I was actually very pleased with those of you that had relationships. Most of them were pointing the right directions. That's actually really important. It's especially important when you build the database. If you get the database, things in the wrong direction, again, you won't be able to enter data. Condition goes to inventory 2. So I'm going to, where do I want to put it? I'm going to move client. I'm moving things around. You guys don't have to. I'm going to try to make a coherent chart out of this. No promises, though. Especially this big. I have trouble seeing. So condition is just a lookup. So, and I'm going to hook it. You know, you only enter the condition once here, but it could appear many times in the inventory. So again, one to many. Does that make sense so far? I will, when we're done, I'll make a big picture. There's a way to display this all at once. It'll be too tiny to read, but maybe it'll give you the overall look. So I'm going to move purchase detail over here because it's the purchase detail that hooks to inventory. And I'll bring a relationship over. Okay, so in this case, it's one thing from purchase detail. Come on. One way you can tell if it's hooking, I don't want to hook it there. Come on, move there. If the whole outer thing turns green, that means it's supposed to be hooked. Although I think this just failed to hook. Yeah, see, it's not hooked. Come on. All right. So I hooked that. I hooked the purchase detail to inventory. Again, nothing is, theoretically I hooked it. Okay. I don't know how we're going to get sale in there. I'm going to bring purchase down here. And the purchase ID is hooked to purchase detail. Again, one purchase could have many details. And then we need the client. Where is the client? I'm going to move the client down into the middle. Yeah, it's on top of everything now. Okay. So, one client could be involved in many purchases. It still didn't hook. Why won't it hook? Okay. Client is also involved, one client, in sales. So sale is up above here. I hate these. I really do hate these. Okay. And sale detail. Okay, and in client, the inventory, this is going to be a mess trying to get from inventory to this. Yeah. I might try to move things around again. So for the inventory, I want one. As I think I mentioned to some people, come on, down, 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 down. So that's insane. We'll see what we can do with that. Okay, employee is hooked to one employee, could be part of many sales. Where's purchase? That's way up, out of the way too, isn't it? There are some of the other diagramming softwares are much better than Visio for doing these.
What's your preferred software?
When I do this for myself, I typically just do it on paper.
It's online and it's free and it's been really awesome.
Which one is that?
Lucid Chart.
Oh yeah, Lucid Charts. It's free for a while.
I'm just a free. Like there's like a free trial, but then there's also just like a free one that as long as you're not doing more than like 16 entities.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, Lucid Charts is actually pretty good. Yeah. Or Lucid. So it's an online diagrammer. Yeah.
On the editing tools, I'm finding it's much easier when I'm looking at the lines to switch from pointer tool to connector tool.
Oh,
And then I can manipulate that little line so much easier.
okay, that's a
And
good.
outlines appear and all kinds of stuff. So I think this is just easier.
Yeah, okay.
That would make sense.
Because then you're
Request, where's that link to?
What is which link to?
Requests?
So it links to employee. It also needs to link to client. Did it do that? Except that that's the wrong endings.
You said client and sale detail for the request?
Yeah, so client goes to the request.
Are you gonna post this so that from the last?
Yeah, I am going to post it, and it's impossible to follow this. So the connector tool, so end symbol. That's not what I want.
Inventory's not connected to the cell, right?
What?
Yeah, no.
Inventory connected to.
I'm still having trouble actually.
Do you lose link when you move the stuff around too?
You're not supposed to, but damn it, it keeps changing the wrong end. All right. So yeah, so it went there, but it's a bit weird. We also need, so we got employee ID. We also need like artist ID and album ID, which would be a foreign key too. So you got the connector on and you're still pulling these in? We've got album ID, client ID, employee ID. I don't think I have artist. I will post this. I'm just looking to see if I've left anything out.
I have a question.
Yeah.
about the relationship between inventory and like the sales and purchase details.
Yeah.
Would those be one-to-one?
They could be logically one-to-one. The database is going to make them one-to-many. Doesn't matter what you say it is, it's going to be a one-to-many as far as the
So is
database
that
is
like
concerned.
one inventory item?
Theoretic, so the way we've defined inventory,
Uh-huh.
it's one-to-one in the sense that every inventory item is a singleton, right? So you could do one-to-one, but the database won't do that. The only time a database will make something a one-to-one relationship is if they share the same primary key.
Okay.
I mean, just logically, it's a one-to-one. Practically, when you build a database, it's going to be a one-to-many.
Which side is the money?
I would put the mini on the sale side. Let me look. I'm going to go to view. Whoa, what a mess. But this is what we got so far. I could maybe move some of it up. So I think I have all the relationships here, but as I said, it's kind of a spaghetti thing. If I spend a lot of time at it, and I might spend a little time on it, but not in class here, rearranging these, sometimes you can get a better looking diagram. You know, just rearrange them so that these lines don't crisscross as much and do different things. Drawing it by hand is a lot easier. And we actually, did you do yours in Lucid?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I did.
Does it look better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also like the background is also graph paper.
Oh, well, you could do that here.
But I'm pretty spatially like oriented.
Yeah, I mean, you could actually do that here too. You can turn on the graph paper look. So this is just a quick review, and as I said, I will post it, but I might actually try to move it around. Like yours looks nicer. I might try to move things around, but we have the inventory. Inventory is sort of a big key because it's part of this, you know, there's a lot of things that connect here. The album, the condition, and the purchase are in there. We have the album and the artist, and then we have the linking table between the two because One album can have many artists. The only reason I would bother with this is that it's fairly common, I think, to search for things by artist, right, as opposed to just by the album name. The condition, this is just a lookup table, and this actually is optional, but it helps you stay consistent when you're doing things. We have our clients, which are both our customers and the people that sell to us. We did employees separate. It is possible to combine these and just say people, and they're an employee because they can do things other, in the register, but we'll leave that separate. We have our sale and our sale detail. The sale detail, although it's lost here, basically pulls the actual inventory item down. We have our requests, and the request has have a lot of links too. It links to the client, links to the album, which, as I said, I wouldn't make it an absolute because maybe they're asking for an artist. I put the artist ID in there too, and I wouldn't make it required. The employee ID probably wouldn't make it required, but I would. The client I would make required. The date I would require, and the notes. I'm not going to do this right now, but if you were really doing this very carefully, the way you do, I have to escape out of this. The way you make something required is you can say set required, and basically what happens when you do something as required, it just turns it bold. That's how you mark it as required. That has some implications when you build the database, because you have to determine if you're going to make it. Basically, the way you make a thing required is you say that it's not null. It can't be left empty, right? And if you say it can't be left empty, then you can't proceed with that data until you have that value, right? You won't be able to enter that piece of data without that value.
Sort of random question. If for like clients, you wanted to say be able to look them up like by their phone number or whatnot, would you want to make that a primary key? Is that more like software user interface?
Yeah, you don't have to. You could look them up by their phone without making it a key. You could, if you want it to be unique, or if you want their email to be unique, there is such a thing as a unique constraint. So without making it the key, you can still make it so that it's not repeatable. But yeah, you can search by any field. So you could search for clients by phone number or by email or by. Some things, I'm not going to do it now. And I think I'm just going to save this and let it be. And then I'll mess with it a little bit before I post it. Some people would do, like with the phone, they might do the area code as a field. They might don't do the first three letters, basically give you an area. So there's an area code, and there's they might break it up into the different groups, because those have meanings in terms of if you want to fine tune where things are. Location.
Like if you're doing some sort of like analysis on your survey.
Right. We're not going to do that. So, big questions before we move on to the next thing, before I save this. And as I said, I will try to make it a little neater before I post it. But yeah.
You were talking about a lookup table.
Yeah.
Like if you did states. And I was having a discussion with my partner regarding the purchase orders, the purchases in the
Right.
database, and wanting to make the purchase IDs reflect the date. Could you do that by creating a date lookup table, or like you'd have to just put every date that ever could be in that table?
Yeah, I don't know that I would do a date lookup.
Like I wanted the key for the purchases, the purchase ID to be like a 6-number date with like 01 or 02 or 03.
Yeah, I wonder why.
He said, well, because then the date is not a field you need to add to it. It's reflected in the ID of the purchase.
Yeah, generally one of the the principles of a key is that they really shouldn't have much meaningful data in them.
Okay,
The key is really just used to connect things.
okay.
So when you search by date, it's actually really easy to search by date. What did your partner say?
He said that he just was like, there's no way to do that.
There's not a good way to do that.
Why?
One of the things that you sometimes find in a lot of databases is that everything's timestamped,
Mhm.
and you could do a timestamp on every record if you want. The timestamp, though, goes out to the nanosecond usually.
Yeah.
um,
And then another question is like, I'm presuming that in the entry of, like, for instance, the purchase date or the sales date, you can force those to be done in a manner that is consistent across the database.
so databases, there's a data type,
Okay,
right? And it will let you enter your date in SQL Server will let you enter your date with slashes or dashes or different ways. But no matter how you enter it, it always looks the same in the database.
okay, like Excel, like if you format it to a date.
Yeah, and it's always going to be year, month, day. Unless you said that you are in Europe. And then it'll use a European format for dates. It's just sort of like if you say you're, they call it a collation. If you say you're in England, it'll use pounds, not dollars. If you say you're in France, it'll use euros, you know. So I'm saving this just to save. I'm going to just put it in documents for right now. I'm going to just say it's Vince's. And when I post it, so here's something. I could upload this into files as a drawing if you want it that way, or I could just make a PDF and have a picture of it once I made it a little neater. If you have a preference, maybe I'll do both. So if it's a drawing file in the files, I mean, you could manipulate it.
I think I can answer your question.
What?
About trying to use the date.
Yeah.
Using a separate appliance itself, the actual receipt machine, and then point of sale machine.
So,
Interface data on that.
yeah, no, so when you do a point of sale, some people go directly to the database, but it's actually a lot of point of sales are their own, they store their own data, and then you can upload it later to your database or to your spreadsheet. You should go either way. My daughter owns a bakery, not a bakery, a restaurant, Cruiser Cafe in Eatonville, and their points of sale, it just gives them a big, basically a comma delimited file that can go either to a database or to it has all the information, how it was paid for, you know, payment type, the amount, tipped amount, all of those kinds of things are there. Okay, so I've saved this and I will post. The next thing I want to do, if we got time, I hope we have time. Now this will be a little bit, you're not necessarily at the same desks that you were last time. At least I know, Jess, yeah. The which, oh, I'm not sure what I was saying. So generally, you can make fields required. And if you make a field required, that means that they have to be entered. If you don't have that data, you can't enter that. So you have to be a little careful what you require. You don't want to require things that might not. Well, no, we're not going to do it now, but we will have to when we make the actual database. You will have to determine if they're required or not. So, how many of you have your virtual machine on? Sue downloaded it.
Where's the link? Where's this?
All right, so let me show you where it is again. And then I'm going to show you how to load the virtual machine. But for the link, let me zoom up. All right. So you want to go probably to the file manager. You want to go to local disk C, users, public, and you want to go to public documents, shared virtual machines, and there where it says Windows 10, right click on it and copy it. If you drag it because you're on the same hard drive, it'll just move it. You don't want to move it because you want it there. If you screw up, you want to be able to go back and get it. And also because there's another class that might need it. So just copy it, desktop or to My Documents. The advantage of desktop or My Documents is that nobody else can mess with it. A couple of things about that is it's going to take at least 10 minutes to copy, maybe longer. Say it's 58 gigs or 68, I forget what. So copy to the desktop or the Windows 10 one? Yeah. Some of you have Ubuntu also, which I
It's
don't.
a different class.
Yeah, it's a different class.
Not erase that, please.
Can we not use that for this?
What? Not for this. Are you in that class too? You want the Windows 10 one.
Sorry.
You could, although I would not necessarily suggest it, you could use the Ubuntu for the other two, but it'll make your life more difficult because you'll have to adjust everything you do to Linux. And probably command line only. Although if you do have Linux at home or you run Linux, again, everything except the first thing we're doing will run on any operating system. The first thing we're going to do is SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server. It will only run on Windows. That being said, they have recently betaed a Linux version. But again, it's command line only and it's very different. So I would ignore that, and we're just going to say it only works on Windows for right now. So you want to make this copy. I'm going to show you how to load it, and we'll start the download of SQL Server. Some of you that are copying the virtual machine over right now, you'll have to do this a little later, and that's fine. And I'll help you if you need. The other thing is, so when you do this, these virtual machines don't move with your profile. You can log into any machine and it'll come up with your name, but the virtual machine will only be on this machine, right? If you go to another machine, you're going to have to download it and copy it again and set it up again. That's a pain, but it's just the way it is. It's big, so they don't move it around with the profile. Someday, if they ever fix all the things up there, David said he's going to try to get it so your whole profile moves, including things like your virtual machines. But all right, so those that have it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up VMware. And I just typed VM into the, I guess that's Cortana, whatever, the search bar. So I just did VM Workstation Pro. You can have this for free at home if you want. You do not need it to run these programs. We need it in here to run the programs because I don't know if you've ever looked on these, but you can't even download an update to Chrome. You have no permission. So we want to use the VMware. I already have one loaded, but you can ignore that. You'll get something like this. We have 112 days left. I think that's good enough for this quarter. When you get it, if you get this for free, they give it to you for a year, and then you have to get a new license to update it or pay for it. Right? But you can get it for free for a year, and usually you can get another license.
See that player just work?
What?
Can Workstation player just work?
Yeah. Does it?
It's free.
for whatever. So this has a few more features than the player, but you could probably use the player. This allows you to create virtual machines. I think the player just lets you play them, right?
I do play when we play.
Huh. Anyway, I haven't tried it. I've always just used this. You do not want to create a new virtual machine. You want to open a virtual machine. And I'll go through this as many times as need be. So I'm going to go to desktop and Win10, and then I'm going to open the Win10. So what you want to do is you want to go to desktop or wherever you put it. If you put it in my documents, you want to go to documents and find it. Find the Win10 folder and then open it, and it'll have this. This is from VMware. If you do it just by going to the folder, it's sometimes kind of hard to figure out which one of those files this is. So I always just open it from the folder, from VMware. Trying to move VMware over. All right, so I'm going to do open. Okay, so what you get, it'll be over here. It'll tell you the details. It'll use 2 processors. I could probably expand that. 4 gigabytes is probably enough. NAT looks okay. You don't need to worry about those generally. If it gets really slow, you can up the memory a little bit, or possibly up the processors, because I think these all have 4. But you're running this, you're going to be running the virtual machine. Basically, you're running 2 copies of Windows on top, one on top of the other. And they're nothing compressed, right? It's 2 full copies of Windows. That's why I said at home you probably don't want to do this, because it's just takes a lot of resources to do that. When you get this dialog box, it's considered better to say I moved it, although I haven't really seen. The idea of if you copied it, there could be licensing issues. Even though it's in a virtual machine, you're supposed to have paid for all of the software inside of it. So, but I've never noticed that it makes much difference. This is just telling you what's connected to your machine, and you can just sort of ignore that and press OK.
How did you get to that point?
I just did start.
So right here.
Yeah, right there. So where it says start, where it says power on. Yeah. Say you move. And then just do OK. What is it saying next? What does that one say? It's up to you if you want to do that. You can install it into the virtual machine. In the virtual machines, you have admin. Right now, remind me later. I haven't actually opened this virtual machine before, so we'll see what's. I think it has nothing in it but Windows, actually. I probably foolishly said to David that we would do our own installations. It has SQL, but yeah, if we fail, we'll do that. But I think we'll be fine. So there's a couple of things I want to show you. One of the things that I usually do, though you do not have to. Actually, let me kill my Zoom. Well, first, this one little thing here, it puts you in full screen mode. Then you're in the virtual machine, and it takes over your whole window, including the toolbars. And that way you don't get confused. Sometimes if you're running at a window in a window, it gets confusing because you have 2 copies of Windows and you have 2 tool trays. And it can be a little confusing as to which is which. So I tend to just click that and run it in full screen mode. I'm going to do this because if I want to magnify, I prefer to do it inside the virtual. So I'm going to maximize it. and it takes over the full screen.
You don't have to do that. If you prefer to run window in a window, you can.
And to come out of it, you just click that again. All right, so I think the password here is just password. Same as we did before. Capital P at SSW0RD1. So capital P at sign SSW0RD1. Then once I get in, I can zoom again. Did you guys get it? I could write it up there if you want. I think I just need to get the, and it may take it a moment to stabilize here. I'm just getting the magnifier. Oh, come on. It can take it a little bit to, usually after it gets going, it's a little bit faster. So hopefully you have internet. Do you guys have internet? Okay. Gog and Magog? That's because I was typing mag for magnifier. Interesting. So what I'm actually going to search for here, how many, everybody get in? Okay, I know some of you are still downloading. That's fine, I'll help you when we get. So those that have it down are okay.
So we're talking Internet Explorer or?
Yeah, I think that's all you got right now. Now, if you want to download, actually, does it have anything else? Actually, before I go there, I'm going to real quickly, you guys don't need to do this. I just want to see what is actually on here. Yep, just the basic Windows. That's what there is. So if you want to do, like, not right now, if you want to download like Chrome or Firefox, that's perfectly fine. Literally, you can do whatever you want in here in terms of adding stuff. So you can add those things. Yeah.
Any suggestion? Because these shared boxes, the one on the class have access to that, you know, tag machine and stuff, and make their own account.
You can make your own account. I might show that later if you want. It's a little bit, I guess actually we should do it if we're going to do it now, because when we install SQL Server, you want it to be with the account. You guys want to make your own account? That adds a little bit of complexity though. Or you just want to leave it admin. Real life, you don't want to generally run admin. What? Yeah. I'll show you later, I guess, how to make an account if you want. You have to create a new user. You'd have to give it admin privileges anyway. But you could make a user with your name if you wanted. And you can change the password. However, if you change the password on this, unlike on the underlying machine, you're screwed if you forget it. Just to let you know, because I can't change it. All right. So I'm going to just real quickly, the next thing we want to do is look for SQL Server. Express. And we might as well go with the newest, 2016. So I'm going to click on that. So I just typed in SQL Server Express. And I want SQL Server Express full download. Is that what I want? That looks like Stack Flow is probably not the actual. I want downloads. So I'm going to go down. That's 2014. SQL Server 2016 download free, I think. I just want to get to the download. We don't want to do the developer edition. We just want the Express. So I'm just browsing. I can help you do it if you get lost. We just want the SQL Server Express edition.
SQL Server 2016.
Yeah, SP1 Express edition. My address here, if you wanted to go there directly, I don't want to do a survey, is Microsoft.com, en-us, SQL Server, SQL-server/SQL-server editions/express. But I think it's easier to find just by typing SQL Server Express downloads. I am not going to participate in that, and I'm just going to do download now. So let's see how fast this does or doesn't go. If it fails because we're all doing it at once, although it should be fine, it usually is, although I'm not moving. Is everybody kind of frozen there?
I clicked.
It still is something. The Flash player is out of date.
Left.
Install it.
Oh, that's not good.
I got it. I'm not sure where to save it to though.
Mine says your Flash player is out of date. Please install it now and continue this.
Shouldn't need a flash player to download. I just crashed. I just got a blue screen of that.
Okay, now it says Flash. It shows me if it's Flash unavailable, update your Flash player. Should I do that?
I don't know why you would need flash to download it. Does anybody else have that?
When you click to download it, it pops you up to a weird blank page that for many of us is just sitting there blank. Go back to the one that says SQL Server, and on the bottom it says like, do you want to save this?
Oh,
And then
okay.
you can go there.
Although I think I may just be,
You have to probably look like it.
yeah, mine's crashing. I may. So Eli, what would you say? I have a blue screen of death. If I just kill it and restart. If this fails, what I'll do is I'll go back to the one in public folders. And I'll actually run it from there, which is probably not a great idea. So, let's see what happens. How many got it downloading? Okay, good.
I'm running. You want the 2016 download?
Yeah, 20.
That says download free.
Yes. Yeah, we definitely want free. So wait a second. All right, so I'm going to try. Instead of the, I'm just going to do.
I use Firefox, but I'm very proud of that.
Probably because it doesn't have any extensions, but so I'm going to just real quickly. What I'm not sure of is if now this isn't from Microsoft. Let's go back. Yeah, so I want download though. Oh, I saw it at the top. See, I want SQL Server Express 2016 download, and it's free. Yes. So we did download now. It came up with that blank white page, but if we go here and then say no, and then say save. Actually, it's going to go to downloads if you just do save, which is fine. So I think it's saved, right? All right, so you can do run. If you didn't do run, you can go to the download folder and double click the, I'll just show you real quick, although I'd have to.
Do run because you want to allow staff to make changes to your device.
Yeah, and you want to say yes. And it should pop up an installer here. And then I may try to make things big. Come on, bring me the installer. You guys have an installer, just hopefully mine will pop up.
It took a minute. It took a minute for mine to load.
So what installation type do you want? Basics, custom, or download?
I think I want to look at it to know. We want, if possible, we want to make sure that it has the, so if we do custom, let's do custom.
So we should do custom instead of basic?
I think so. Partially just because I'm not entirely sure what's in here. So specify this part I would just do. You guys need a zoomer on mine. See if I can get a magnify. Okay. Whoa. All right. So in this case, I would just do install. What I'm not sure is that whether this has the front end or not. It may just be the database. So we might have to go back and get the front end.
Which option was that?
I did custom, but I'm not sure there's any difference here. So this may take a minute. And if you don't get here today, as long as we get it by like Monday, we should be okay. Yeah. Yeah. So if you do it on a Mac, you have to open the virtual or you could just ignore doing this one, because the other one too will be so I mean, you cannot ignore doing it, but just do it in class with this one. Yeah, if you that's fine.
Do we have access to this, any other time?
So that's actually a good question. I'm gonna try to give you lots of time. We've been talking about when this room might be available. Fridays, there's no class, there are no classes in here. Possibly Saturday. The trick is getting somebody to open it. Yeah, the trick is- So Lisa had said she's going to try to get at least one of the tutors to work in here so that the room would be available on Fridays. That being said, I don't have any like a schedule for it yet. I will try to give you a lot of in-class time. So I don't know how long this will take to install. I'm hoping not a long, long time. One reason I wanted to do the install is a lot of people go home and then get confused when they try to install it. So one of the things that I'm not 100% sure of here is whether this comes with the management studio. The management studio is the front end. So if this doesn't come with the management studio, we'll have to go get it as well. And again, I'm hoping that it doesn't take forever.
It takes way longer to install than it does to download the install package.
Yeah, the trouble is we're still, I think all it does is it downloads a series of things that still goes and gets it online. So I think it's still getting the install package. The full version of SQL Server is a bit daunting to install. If you want to do that at home, because you can get those for free. It's big, it's a lot bigger, and the install is more complex because it's assuming you know what you're doing. And it asks you questions like, do you want a cluster? Do you want, and you don't. And it asks you to set up certain accounts and things, so it's a little bit more complicated.
So basically, once we set this up, we should not be changing our seats, correct?
That's true. If you do change your seat, you'll have to reset up again.
And then you mess up somebody else's stuff.
No, it shouldn't. I mean,
But if they can't, so like game stuff last week, you have to rebuild everything.
yeah, no, once you set this up, it'd be best if you keep your seat so that you don't want to displace anyone else. Yeah. I thought you wouldn't be physically messing up their VM, but you'd be making it so they can't access it. Yeah. Oh, come on.
So, do you want to change this?
Yes.
I think my name.
Oh, you should. So you're trying to install it on the underlying machine? You have to be in the VM. So log into the VM. No, you need to be inside of it. So.
So if you install basic, it gives you then the installation.
And I'm sure we'll be able to. So we do want the management studio. The reason I did custom is I wasn't sure if the basic gave you that option. So basic is fine also. What? I guess basic is all right too, because I just wanted to make sure it gave the option. They're touchscreens because they wanted to for the Android development stuff.
Yes,
I heard, yeah.
yes, that's mostly.
That's the management studio, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you want the management studio.
Go back to the sheets.
So, first thing like.
So
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, which one are you doing?
Top one.
Okay, that was
Next one, next page. Next.
you're fine with it.
She's ahead of us. Okay, so. So we're at this point now.
You didn't shoot it in that.
Do anything else with the management? Whole bunch of things. I did the testing.
You did the custom, so I think Steve just need install SQL Server Manager, but.
Name instance SQL Express next.
Yeah, so, for her,
management tools. Because I did the custom.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the same. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. No food or drinks. So far.
Install and configure.
At least put it over there on that side.
Install and configure.
I know, I was like.
That's all
No, you need the first one first. You have to do that. And then we'll probably get back on.
Oh.
You have to accept it.
That was a fun idea.
Is it? Noon already? Or is it 11? 12:15. So if you guys need to go, how close are you? This is taking longer than I hoped.
I guess what, I got the management studio thing. Is it a PDF or is it more
It
stuff?
shouldn't be a PDF.
Because right here, I did put in a custom thing
Right.
like this.
Right.
And then it gave me this.
Oh, you do that right to this end and
This.
come back.
And then it says this.
Oh, so then you download it.
Yeah, I hit on like that. But I didn't tell them what was happening.
All right. Yeah, no.
See? It's not saying it's anything's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna-
Do I get
If
those
you need to
today?
go, why don't you just leave it run? I will watch it. and I'll post it. Yeah. Oh, no problem. You could lock it, but I think the shit's supposed to die. Yeah, so I think I can do that.
I'm sorry, you need to go with the first
Yeah.
option.
If you haven't started, don't. Yeah, if you haven't started it yet, wait.
Oh, okay, wait.
One of the things you can do is you can save things in the state that they are.
That's another thing. People, please push your chairs in once you're done.
So if you haven't started it, don't, because we don't have enough time. We will do it Monday, we'll finish it up.
So just X out of it? Just X out?
So one of the things that you can do, and I usually don't advise this, but I'm going to advise it now.
for this time only is what we'll go up to. I'm going to do Alt Control to get my cursor out of there. I am going to, I want to shut this down. I want to suspend the guest. Yeah. Let's just, if you suspend it, what it'll do is it'll hold it in the position the way it is now. And it'll close down, but it'll hold it the way it is now. Generally, I don't advise that because every time I've ever had trouble with it, it's because of suspending it. But normally it does work. And that way, when it comes up, it'll be where it was. So that's a possibility. I did not realize that we were getting that late a time. So what I did, again, under VM, let's see if I can max. I'm going to use the, so under the VM, yeah, the virtual machine. So under the VM folder, Windows 10 over here. Yeah, suspend guest. So power, suspend guest. When you come back, you can resume.
So do we just X out at the very top, actually leave this like this?
Yeah, you should be, once it's suspended,
Suspend this one here.
yeah, and then you can close it. And then you can log out.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's like at least
Oh, okay.
where you're at. So it's done.
Okay. So it's always Stephen.Hunter at Seattle Colleges. Seattle Colleges. I will try. I cross. Once you suspended it, you can close it and you can lock out.
And then the diagram, you want us to upload that as our.
Yeah, and don't worry about it too much right now. I will post it, but I didn't get it posted yet. I mean, if you have your own diagram, you can post it, but I will post the one that we did. In fact, I might just upload it to Canvas.
Send it, we can close it and log out.
Yeah.
When you start finding anything, make yourself a folder in that is
So when you, again, you can close the virtual machine.
So normally what I do is I go down this is how if you're in process, if you save with the state, it'll save it right where it was.
Yeah.
Did you want to send it to revise one yet, or just gonna wait on that?
You can do it or wait. I haven't posted the one with the class, so I need it.
Okay.
I will post it in the next one.
But you got it. Okay, all right. That's fine. Yeah.
Even if you get this part done, I would still probably just suspend it because there's the next part, which is getting the, the management.
Well, I'll share that in the morning, especially the first couple of weeks. I'm walking around the computers. Has anybody turned it on? Jump around.
If it's
Not
the
to me.
same and you're confident.
That doesn't mean that you're going to get upset.
Once it turns on, so.
Okay, thank you.
What brand is it?
I don't know. It was just silver, metal.
Check your stickers.
Why don't you just suspend it? If the worst comes to worst, we'll just have to restart it. So suspend it, and I think it'll store it safe. And then if it fails, as I said, we can, just redo it.
Yeah,
I have got an interview on Monday, so
That's fine.
maybe I come out, like, I don't know, it's from 10:30, so maybe I can.
it'll be all right. I think we'll probably be spending most of the time finishing this install on Monday.
Yeah, yeah.
And then going over what, hopefully going over SQL Server.
Yeah.
So,
So VM, they are kind of lost now.
yeah, that's fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
but yeah, it will take some time, so that's fine. Once you're click.
Yeah, once we get this set up, then it won't be so. I knew this would be challenging. I thought we had more time left than we did. That clock confuses me sometimes.
Oh, yeah. No, this is fine. It's
Probably
just,
fast.
oh,
The
yeah,
hour
yeah,
is way
yeah.
fast. The
So I
minutes are
like
right.
that. I don't like that.
I don't imagine why I haven't said it. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, might be like the way we did in our class, like you were doing with us. That could be a better way because some people are ahead of you and some people are like copying
Yeah.
VM. So it's kind of, yeah.
I don't remember how I did.
We did like everyone was on the same stage. On the first day itself, you said
Oh, right.
copy the VM. So everyone was done with the VM on the first day.
Right, which we did. We did do a copy last
I-
time. A lot of people didn't have a copy, but we did, as a class, do a copy
Yeah,
of it.
I
Yeah.
think some of the people missed it, so they didn't copy it. Okay then, see ya.
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah. Have a good interview.
Yeah,
I hope you.
hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, bye.
So I did through Canvas. I sent you a Google Doc link.
Okay.
PDF that I did for today.
All right. Let's see if I got. So, and you did it through the mail or through your?
Through your mail. Through the mail. Through the inbox. Yeah. And it did come through. No, that did not. Well, that should be really recent. So if it didn't come through, that means it's not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Processing.
If it's not there, we could do it through.
I'll just do it through your email address. On
Sure,
that
sure.
I found that, so I'll fire off through that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I kinda
that's
figured
fine.
It wouldn't go through on Canvas either because they're not going to give me everything. So, lets me know to email my other teachers too. Cool. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Although, let's look. Well, that was mail, so that should have been there. Yeah. That's not how you spell it, Vincent. I was trying to make a link to it, but it wasn't going to let me. So where are you guys?
Finish the whole down there, maybe an option to close it. Today. And then there was nothing there.
Oh, there won't be.
Oh, okay,
There's no visual representation of it, that's why we need that.
okay. So I found the folder in here on the local disk.
Yeah, you can't open it.
Okay, so.
But with a setup, you can run.
I can run the setup?
Yeah, next time.
Okay, so I'm at a good stopping point.
Yeah. So the setup, what we're running is to get the manifest. The database itself is just a service that runs on that.
So should I go ahead and just shut this down?
So, yeah, actually, you could get back to the point where you could actually shut it down.
Shut down this then?
Yeah. And you can, what does it say? Oh, that you're trying to shut it down externally, which you can do, or you can shut it down in here.
Oh.
And I can show you how to switch up. So you actually want to go to power. And just power it down. And I can show you, as I said, next time I show you how to stretch the image and everything.
She was so far ahead of everybody, they ground the balls.
Now I want to get a little tiny bit of lunch.
Do you have a class at 1?
Yes.
Oh, geez.
So it'll probably be a bit chaotic at the beginning and then because everybody's at different heights, which is not what I remember.
Steve, do you know if Deborah is upstairs?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if she has a crap in the classes there.
They changed them around so much, I have no idea. Okay, great, thanks. Okay.
Yeah. I'm afraid if I.
See you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's done. Yeah, close that. And actually. I'm going to power. I'm going to say extend that. Close that. Yeah, how close are you? You're pretty close.
Thank you.
That's it. I don't know why that-
So, could I tell me now?
What?
Tell me now.
If you want to, you can.
If I can make sure my
drawing is right, so I can run it. But I think as your
Yeah,
it's okay.
yes, yeah, it's fine. And as I recall, you selected it anyway, when you turned it in the first time, wasn't it? I think it was one of the better ones.
I'm sorry.
When you turned in your first copy, I think yours was one of the better ones anyway. So yes, it's fine, turn it in.
Okay.
I won't.
Complete. So I just type close.
Okay. So what you want to do, yeah, that's fine, and then you just do, you can leave that up, actually, let's do this. Let's just do, VM power suspend, yeah, so it'll leave it right where it was. If you shut it down, it'll shut down all of that, which I'm pretty sure you can get it back, but it's just
Oh.
easier.
No.
That's okay. Is that, you spend a lot more time on the install, less on the.
it.